Good morning, World Wisdom's community. Delighted that you're able to share these few moments with us. As you know, last year, the World Wisdom's Project, as a year and a half ago, actually, the World Wisdom's Project decided to take the initial days of our shutdown to think about what the implications of that experience might be for us as the city of Fort Collins, for the World Wisdom's community, and for the world in general. And so we began a series that was focusing on the possibilities that our time at home would allow us to see a little more clearly some of the experiences of life that in our busy, busy lives we tend to rush by and not really take advantage of. And so we had a series of ongoing video blogs of people who spoke about the benefits of that quiet time and also the new insights that were occurring to them as the pandemic began to unroll seriously. Certainly in the summer of 2020, much social unrest enlarged our awareness even more deeply to some of the implications of our lives around us that we hadn't perhaps noticed before. We continued at that point to consider how World Wisdoms could respond to that social unrest, and hence we began a series of town halls, 4 town halls, in fact, that looked at the underlying issues that were causing that social unrest. During that 4-session experience, over 700 people in Fort Collins began to focus on the sometimes hidden inequalities that were a part of our community that we perhaps hadn't noticed before, the injustices experienced by some in our communities. We were able, through our Zoom meetings, to trace some of the historical roots of these hidden inequities in Fort Collins, some of the injustices that today are a part of our ordinary life. And we began to see that those experiences of injustice were actually embedded in our founding history. Over the course of those 4 town halls, we attempted to form allyship bonds with both the BIPOC community and other groups working for justice as we attempted to right those wrongs. That work continues even into the present, but we all know that that work is far from completion. This video blog series is attempting to see how far we've traveled since the summer of 2020 here in Fort Collins, to see if we have become any more just, any more equitable, any more compassionate in the fall of 2021 than we were in 2020. So this video series is an attempt to ask individuals and communities what their perspective, what their contributions may have been to this effort. So today I warmly welcome Dr. Carron Silva, who has been a Fort Collins resident for a good number of years. And I'm going to ask Carron to tell us a bit about your background and what has kept you busy in Fort Collins during this very significant part of our history.
Thanks, Marianne. I lived in Fort Collins for 27 and a half years now. We came here, I was a stay-at-home mom, a qualified teacher. I had taught in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and stayed at home with my kids until my son was in 1st grade, and then got a job in Poudre School District. Was within the district for 22 and a half years and taught middle school and became an instructional coach to teachers as well. Various roles in the district as far as MTSS and other leadership roles in my building. And in 2016, decided that I was going to graduate from the classroom and pursue the principalship. And from there, I decided that the principalship was not for me. And so when the opportunity came up to continue onto a PhD, I did that. I left the district in January of 2018 under very unfortunate circumstances. And I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but it was heartbreaking for me to have to leave the Poudre School District.
Tell us a little bit more perhaps about your PhD work. What particular direction did you go in with that?
So my PhD work actually sprang out of the work that I did at Catholic Charities. I was doing my internship for my principalship at a local elementary school. And that particular school had an amazing after-school program. And I noticed when I was doing bus duty that the kids who were living in low-income housing, affordable housing, and kids living at the homeless shelter were not going into the building after school. Those buses were full. So I started asking questions. I wanted to know, why are these kids not staying here for PSD after 3? And barriers went up. I didn't get straight answers. And so I just kept asking. And I ended up going to the mission and meeting with the director there and saying, hey, I want to know where these kids are. What are they doing after school hours? And they didn't know. So we had a huge gap there of kids being on the streets, in their cars, in the middle of winter. And I was concerned about that. So I actually went to Poudre School District and asked if they would take me on as an intern to solve this problem, because apparently the problem was transportation. I was met with opposition there, and so I decided to go out on my own. And they opened the doors for me at Catholic Charities, and I immediately went to work. And with my licensure, I was allowed to not write my final project as the first 100 days of a principal. I was able to write a strategic plan for starting an after-school program. And that's what I did. And within 3 weeks, we were up and running. And Care Housing actually heard about what I was doing at Catholic Charities. And at that point in time, April of 2019 was when I was approached by the executive director of Care Housing and asked if I would come to Care and initiate a pilot youth program for them. And so I got my team members from the shelter to help me, and we designed a summer program and ran it at one of the Care Housing communities, and it was very successful. And then in the fall, the parents asked us if we would continue with the program, which we did. And that was right before 2020, January 2020, we actually decided we were not going to continue with that program, which was really fortunate. But at the time that Care Housing kind of was looking at how do we create more socially sustainable and inclusive communities. And at the time, what they had decided was to start with the youth. And so running the pilot program really gave them an insight into whether starting with youth would be the most effective way of getting higher levels of engagement from their residents. So that's kind of how things started evolving into this topic of affordable housing for my PhD.
So what you were witnessing in 2019, the inequities in the services provided for those children, actually were the kinds of insights that for many of us began to occur during the actual COVID shutdown times. We began to see that basic services were not being equitably distributed among many populations here in Fort Collins. You had come to that realization perhaps even earlier than the rest of us, in a sense.
Well, yeah, obviously I am a person of color, and I'm keenly aware, having been in the school district for over 22 years, that inequity is not just evident with students, it's evident in administration, it's evident in the teaching population. For me to have been a teacher of color, to go to trainings every year for 20 years, and looking at the room and going, okay, there's 3 brown people in here, and it hasn't changed over 20 years.
Right.
And so one of the reasons why I ended up leaving the district and was challenging that notion and asking questions and really just, trying to push for change. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. I was a lone voice crying out there and didn't have the support. So, but I don't want to go to there,
Right.
I want to focus on the work that I've done. And it's, to me, the inequities that I've seen with students, there's a lot of different factors, and so I don't want to just point to race. Race isn't the only factor. It's an easy factor to go. It's easy to say, oh, it must be because of, their skin color. I grew up under the apartheid system. I know all about discrimination and all about racism. And I don't want to look at it through that singular lens because there's too many factors. We need to look at all of the factors that come into play. The families that I worked with at Catholic Charities, I would have to say that probably 2/3 of them were not people of color.
So economics are a part.
Poverty, it does not discriminate. Poverty does not discriminate. The opioid pandemic does not discriminate. Flooding in Texas does not discriminate. There's natural disasters, there's addiction, there's a lot of family dynamics, mental health. There are all of those factors that come into play, and we really need to take a broader look at why things are inequitable.
So you found a willing and empathetic voice through the Catholic Charities experience, but also through Care Housing.
Yes.
Were there other communities that heard your message that you could pinpoint?
Yes, I actually did talks to Rotary. I went to Rotary for fundraising talks, and I had the Rotary on Campus Rotaract. They held a fundraiser for us and raised some money so that we could buy supplies, and we bought a shed for our program at Catholic Charities. I do want to give a shout out to the really, really strong core team of volunteers who ran the program with me and for me. I actually had to leave the country 3 times because my father was dying of cancer, and I left for long periods of time, and the volunteers ran the program.
Wonderful.
So just, committed people who were there, who understood that mission of accompaniment. We are not there because we feel sorry for people. We are there to accompany people on their journey to wholeness and to healing and to be able to work their way out of poverty. And it's just been wonderful to have the staff at Catholic Charities open the door and then be there to support us through all of that and to welcome us in knowing that their capacity is overstretched. I just talked to the director yesterday. On Wednesday night, they had 88 people spending the night. They have 6 families in overflow right now. So the need is great in Fort Collins. My team, we did this for 3 years. And through the pandemic, we cut our hours during the pandemic, but we were still there. Continue to operate, and now Catholic Charities has officially adopted the program into their ministries. So I am no longer there. I've transferred the whole thing over, handed over all my books, handed over all the materials, and my team. My volunteers are still there who started with me, and they are still operating, and now as part of actually the work of Catholic Charities.
That's amazing. And Care Housing, I presume, is doing a similar carry through?
With Care Housing, so my dissertation was built around the 5-year strategic plan to bring youth and resident voices into the boardroom and to create inclusive, socially sustainable communities. Catholic Charities has 7 communities. They're in the process of acquiring an 8th. And their goal in the next 5 years is to have equitable representation of their residents on the board and to start offering more opportunities for residents to bring themselves up out of poverty and out of lower income housing.
That's wonderful.
So my whole study was based on those strategic goals. And I had planned the whole study to be in person and was ready to roll. I had an office at one of their communities. I had keys to the clubhouse. They had internet installed for me, and I was ready to roll, and then COVID hit. So I had to rewrite my entire study to be online only, and I had to recruit my participants online. And then I just, like any marketing person will tell you, cold calls. So I just got on the phone and I made cold calls because I needed to have enough participants for the study to be valid. And it took a lot of time and a lot of perseverance, but I was able to recruit 1/3 of the families in that community participated in the study.
That's amazing, Carron. That's amazing. Unfortunately, your legacy, as you now take leave of Fort Collins and move to another state because of your husband's work, your legacy, however, will remain. And certainly on behalf of this community, we owe you a great debt of gratitude for opening our eyes to so many things that we didn't know before, and so many ways of empowering others that we didn't know before. I have a final question for you, though.
Sure.
Can you share with us for just a moment what it is that motivated you to take this deeply held awareness that's been a part of your life and make a concrete, positive contribution to the experience in this community? What motivated you to do that?
Well, first I have to talk about growing up in South Africa. You know, as a person of color, as a colored woman in South Africa, we were classified as colored or so-called colored. And having overcome poverty myself, having overcome violence, political violence, as well as violence in my family, and having been an abuse survivor myself, I know that I have the experience and the skills and the training to offer what I have to others. And that's, secondly, my faith. I am a devout Catholic. I live my life according to Catholic social teaching. I believe that the best decisions for improvement are made by the people who are experiencing the problem. And so before I even started at Catholic Charities, I met with the parents and we designed the program together. And those parents, those initial parents, they really gave me guidance on what they needed and how I should go about helping them. And, you know, that's that walking hand in hand with the person actually experiencing the problem and not assuming that you know what they need. So honoring their agency. And that's what my study is also about at Care Housing. Housing is that honoring the wisdom and the strength and the assets that people already have, and then coming alongside them as partners to help them, you know, bring to fulfillment their own hopes and dreams, and then giving them the skill set and the mindset that they need. And so my faith, number one, my experience, number two, and that desire for all of us to really live in a community that is equitable and that is inclusive of everybody.
Well, Dr. Silva, Carron, we thank you so much for the legacy that you have left here in Fort Collins, and also the example that you've given to all of us to dig deep into our own lives, deep into our religious beliefs, our faith beliefs, our spiritual beliefs, to find what is noble, what is best, so that our world truly can become a more compassionate and just and equitable place for all. So on behalf of World Wisdoms, I thank you for your time today with us. And we wish you blessings on the journey wherever life will take you in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mhm.